Hi guys, we're gonna make a comparative analysis in form of a documentary between the alternative and traditional assessment. Also, we're gonna see some definitions about the alternative assessment and the characteristics of traditional assessment, as well as the definition. We're gonna have some interviews with some teachers that will show us their perspective, and also a student that will show us what he thinks about this topic. So let's start with the definition of alternative assessment.
Well, alternative assessment refers to a diverse variety of evaluative approach that differ from traditional standardized testing methods. These assessments are designed to measure students' understanding, skills, and competencies in a more comprehensive, authentic, and holistic manner. This type of assessment often focuses on the application of knowledge in real-world or meaningful contexts, emphasize higher-order thinking, creativity, problem-solving, and the ability to transfer learning across different circumstances. This approach not only makes the assessment process more engaging and relevant for students, but also ensures that the skills and knowledge being evaluated are directly applicable beyond the classroom. As well, this assessment often requires students to analyze information, synthesize ideas, and evaluate outcomes, rather than simply memorize information. Traditional tests typically provide a view of a student's performance at a single point in time, but in contrast, alternative assessment can take various forms, such as portfolios, performance tasks, projects, and presentation, which allow for a more detailed evaluation of a student's learning. These methods can capture the development of a skill over time and in different contexts, providing a more accurate and comprehensive picture of a student's abilities.
Now let's check the perspective of a teacher who is involved in this process every day, what she thinks about it. Let's start with our first guest. She's Gabriela Diaz. She's 24 years old. She's a professor graduating of modern languages at La Gran Colombia University, and currently she works in a language institute.
Hello, we are going to start with the questions. The first one is, in terms of applicability, what impact does the implementation of alternative assessment have on students' learning and motivation?
Okay, the advantage of this assessment is that students can have like a connection with the real world, yes, and also we implement a follow-up process, which is like the most important part in this assessment. Additionally, some feedback is provided to the student in order to, but it's focused on the process, not like in the result, but most of the process, because it's the most important thing. Basically that.
Now we are going to continue to traditional assessment.
Okay.
In which way do the methods and formats of traditional assessments influence the approaches teachers use in the classrooms?
Actually, some way these methods are pretty important, because they create the basis of the students for key concepts, yes. But somehow it's kind of difficult because it's too rough with the student, So it's not as flexible as the previous one. So that's it.
And finally, how do you consider the most effective way to implement both assessments, alternative and traditional?
Well, that's quite interesting, those two processes, because both are important. So we implement the traditional and the alternative. From the traditional, we can take like the basic concepts, and from the other, like experience, and make that the students create those contexts apart from their experience. So also we can be we can be focused on the process and give feedback about that, but also to have like good results. So that's the way we can do everything.
Now continuing with the discussion, let's see the definition of what traditional assessment is.
The definition of traditional assessment, and it refers to conventional methods of evaluating students' learning typically through standardized tests, quizzes, or exams. This kind of methods or this kind of assessment often focus on measuring a student's knowledge and skills in a specific area or subject using formats like multiple choice questions, true or false statements, short answers, and also essays. This method or these assessments are usually conducted under controlled conditions and are designed to objectively compare students' performance against predefined criteria or benchmark.
Now let's continue with a different perspective from a teacher who's currently working in our university. Ricardo Santos, who is an English and French teacher and also has a master's degree in educative competences from Centro Europeo de Posgrado. Let's check his perspective and see what he thinks about this topic.
Teacher, I want to ask you some questions. What are the key characteristics that differentiate alternative and traditional assessment in language assessment?
Okay, thank you for the question. It's a pleasure for me to help you. The first topic that I have to say in order to differentiate traditional assessment and alternative assessment is that, for example, in traditional assessments we are going to be focused on structure, vocabulary, writing, evaluation. Let's say we are going to verify that the structure is correct, but we cannot verify if the skill is integrated. So in traditional assessment, we evaluate the structure of the language. So when we have the alternative assessment methods, we are going to take into account the student. We are going to focus on the structure of the language. So when we have the alternative assessment methods, we are going to take into account the student.
More comprehensive view of the study strength and weakness compared to traditional assessment.
It's more comprehensive because we are going to focus, as I mentioned before, in the student. Yeah, let's say understand the language. There are several studies, there are several research projects related to this. So it is not necessary to go deeper on this, but for example, if we focus on in the learning process, if we take into account what's the student learning, what are his or her strengths and what are his or her weaknesses, that's going to be a little bit more comprehensive because we are going to pay attention to the student. Let's say what's happening with him or with her, of course. So in this case, I think that that's going to be the reason to understand that that's going to be comprehensive. And if you ask me, I will include the word personalized. Let's say it's going to be a personalized learning, where I'm going to understand that my student has a learning process that is absolutely different to other kind of students, and that all the students I have in the classroom don't have the same skills, or they don't have the same weaknesses and the same strengths.
Okay, in what ways can teachers ensure that alternative assessment maintain reliability and validity in language assessment practice?
So reliability, of course, we have to take into account that this is alternative. Yeah, most of teachers and most of institutions and most of methods of language teaching are focused on grammar, on lexical components, let's say how to evaluate those kind of topics in order to have an evidence that students are learning and the process is effective. But if you pay attention to a student's process, if you pay attention about how is the student able to use language as a communicative tool, so we are going to have an evidence of reliability. Let's say we are going to trust in an evaluation because we can confirm that students are able to use language. They are going to be able to use it in real communicative situations, and of course in all the aspects of their lives.
As we've seen in this video, there have been several approaches and several different perspectives about the alternative and traditional assessment. Now let's check the characteristics of alternative assessment so we can clear a little bit all of these ideas.
Characteristics of alternative assessment. Alternative assessment focus on a practical, real-world task Students might work on projects, create portfolios, or give presentations. Alternative assessment include self-assessment, where students reflect on their own work, and peer assessment, where they give feedback to each other. Alternative assessment evaluate a broad range of skills such as problem solving, creativity, critical thinking, and teamwork. In summary, alternative assessment is engaging, personalized, and comprehensive, making it a valuable approach to evaluating student learning.
After checking those characteristics of the alternative assessment and clarification of some ideas, let's move on into our next interview, who's gonna be Wilmer Ibanez, who is currently studying in our university. Let's check his perspective and what he thinks about this topic.
Hello, William. Wilmer, could you please tell me what do you understand about traditional and alternative assessment?
Well, basically what I have learned during all these years and during all this semester at the university is that traditional assessment focuses on measuring the content and knowledge through the exams and tests. On the other hand, while alternative assessment assesses the practical application of the knowledge basically through the projects and presentations.
In your experience, what limitations have you found in selective response assessment for measuring your language skills?
Well, basically, selective response assessment has multiple choice exams, but sometimes they do not demonstrate oral or writing production skills that are often much more focused on memorization. I think that could be like the main limitation.
How do you think alternative assessment methods have impacted your learning and skill development compared to traditional methods?
Okay, that's a really interesting question. Well, I will say that alternative methods have helped me, or have helped me, yes, basically to develop communication and collaboration work, as well as skills that have taught me to approach problems in different ways or in different perspectives, and something that is traditional in the exams and is often on those that we don't see.
How does the feedback you receive and the different types of evaluation affect you? And do you prefer the continuous formative feedback in the alternative assessment offers?
Well, yes, I prefer continuous feedback because I think that it allows me to grow, but like step by step, level by level. It goes gradually instead of receiving a specific feedback that of course is going to be useful, but not that much.
Okay, Wilmer, thank you very much for your opinion, for sharing your time, and see you in another opportunity. Thanks.
It was my pleasure. Goodbye.
As we have seen in the interviews and also in the explanations, we can conclude that alternative assessment and also traditional assessment depends mainly on the teacher's perspective and how it's gonna be developed throughout the classes. To summarize these ideas and also give us some key elements of the things we've seen, we have Maybel Mayorga who's gonna give us a conclusion on this topic.
Based on the opinion on the interview people, we concluded that alternative assessment and traditional assessment both have an important role in students' learning. Traditional assessment, like exams and tests, provide way to make sure knowledge and skill related to a subject. However, alternative assessment such as a project, presentation, portfolios, give the students the opportunity to demonstrate their understanding in a more authentic way, allowing for creativity. Using a variety for assessment technique allow educators to better address the diverse learning needs of all students.
Thanks for your attention and we hope you enjoy the video. See you next time.